What's up, nerds? It's Captain Vulcan. On January 8th of 2026, I got bored doing remote work at home and decided to randomly pick up a model from my Warhammer 40k collection, and I just made a short about it. From then, I made a short every single day because I had a lot of fun making that first one. It gave me a way to express my creativity in a way that I hadn't been able to for a long time. I'd made a few videos on this channel before, but being able to crank out smaller, shorter term videos in the span of 15 minutes a day really scratched an itch for me. And to my surprise, they've been doing very well. So I wanted to just throw together a compilation of all of my model showcases from January. So feel free to put this on in the background and just listen to me ramble for however long this ends up being. And if you like the video and want to see more of my content, I plan on making a lot more stuff in the future. Consider subscribing. I don't know, or don't. I'm not your dad. Today's model showcase is the Primaris Intercessor Space Marine. First released in 2017 in the Dark Imperium box set, the starter box for 8th edition, the Primaris Intercessor is a basic battle line unit. A perfect choice for holding your deployment zone objective, or for pushing forward and pressuring the no man's land objectives. The Primaris Intercessor is regarded as the first in the line of Primaris Space Marine models, the replacements to what are now known as the Old Marines, the smaller, more squat Marines from years past. Taking a look at the model itself, I really like this pose of what seems like the Marine walking forward slowly, a sort of methodical push as he just lays bolter fire into an enemy, probably on an objective that he's trying to take. This particular variation has the bolt rifle without the scope, something that serves no gameplay purpose, and also seems to serve no lore purpose, as their heads-up display has a built-in scope already. Looking at the rest of the model, he has the basic bolt pistol holstered on his belt, these weird little bags that have something, bullets, candy, and a purity seal on his left hip. And that's all there is to say. Very simple model, nothing more, nothing less. Gets the job done, but they have definitely improved on the Primaris design as years have gone on. But I can't give this guy any shame for the way he is. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. Today's model showcase is the Necron Warrior. If you're a Necron player, you are more than familiar with this guy, as you probably have 30 of them in every list you run. The Necron Warrior is the basic battle line foot soldier unit of the Necron forces, a mindless automaton just following the orders of the overlords above him. A perfect choice for every list. Why aren't you running Necron Warriors? This particular Necron Warrior is equipped with a Gauss Flayer instead of a Gauss Reaper on this guy. The Gauss Flayer is the longer range option, whereas the Gauss Reaper is shorter range but higher volume of shots and higher armor penetration. Essentially, if you want your Necron Warriors to be a gun line or to hold a point in your back line, then give them Gauss Flayers. If you want them to move up the board and capture points in no man's land, take a Gauss Reaper. The Necron Warrior first showed up in 1990 in the game Space Crusade, where it was called the Chaos Android. They then got an updated model in 1998. Then 4 years later, in 2002, they got their most classic appearance with the green fluorescent tubes built into their guns. Those tubes were apparently a pain to get into the gun, but they gave the Necron Warriors a very unique look that nothing has ever had since or before. Now they just have these little segments that are just made of plastic with these little green orbs. They're still pretty cool, but not as cool as the fluorescent tubes, in my opinion. And now we have this version of the Necron Warrior from 2020, released in the Indomitus box. Taking a closer look at the model itself, the previously mentioned Gauss Flayer is a very cool gun. Despite it not having the green fluorescent tubes within it anymore, I mean, come on, look at it. It's super solid, makes the Necron Warrior very imposing. Other parts of the model, this particular model seems to have suffered a head wound, which thankfully, due to him being a Necron, will heal probably within the next 3 nanoseconds. I have painted my Necron Warrior and all of the rest of my Necrons in this sort of purple metallic and silver color scheme, which is one that I'm very happy with and I'm excited to paint the rest of my force as. You also notice I put a lot of floral details on the base of this model. That's for specific lore reasons to my dynasty that I will not get into now, but maybe I'll talk about later. Overall, I really like the Necron Warrior, but its simplicity and some of the things it's now lacking that it had previously, I'm going to give this Necron Warrior a 6 out of 10. Today's model showcase is the Stormhawk Interceptor. The Stormhawk is a hold on. Much better. Screw you, comments. The Stormhawk, released in 2016, is an aerial support gunship. It is an excellent choice for anyone who wants to run flyers in 10th edition for some reason. Jokes about flyers aside, it does have the hover ability, so you can use it as essentially just a big weapons platform, which there is definitely value in. My Stormhawk is equipped with 2 assault cannons, 2 Typhoon missile launchers, and a Las Talon, which is essentially a fancy Las cannon that shoots twice instead of once. As with all other flyers of a similar size, it is attached to this 4-prong flying stand, which you glue into the bottom of the model there, and then onto the base. Note to all painters, assemble and paint your Stormhawk before you attach it to the base. It's just going to make life a whole lot easier. As for some other minor details on this model, you can see it has the Imperial Aquila up top. Always need a reminder to give glory to the Emperor. This little dongle doodad, I kind of thought it was an extra gun, but it's not. It's just there. On the bottom of the jet engines are these little skull designs that look like they could be Mechanicus details, which is probably the case. You can also see I have made a mistake in my painting. And you can also see these little landing struts at the bottom, which I suppose extend out when the Stormhawk needs to land. Pretty cool little detail that they have there. And that's pretty much it. This model is super solid. Always get to love to run this thing, even if it's usually a bad choice in a list. So I'm going to give the Stormhawk, let's say a 7 out of 10. I don't know if I'm going to continue doing the number ratings, but I'll keep them for now, I guess. Today's model showcase is a Heretic Trooper. That's right, we're jumping over to Trench Crusade today, because I feel like it, and I think these miniatures are really, really cool. The Heretic Trooper is the basic infantry foot soldier of the Heretic Legions, serving basically any purpose that you really need for them. They can be built to have melee weapons and short-range weapons to go grab objectives or just tie up enemies in combat. They can be given big long-range weapons to just snipe from afar. They can be given big melee weapons to hit really hard. Anything you need, the Heretic Trooper can cover, if maybe not super reliably. One saving grace for the Heretic Trooper is for every 2 troopers you have in your warband, you can upgrade one of them into a Legionnaire, who is just slightly better at either ranged or shooting, depending on which you choose when you assign them to a Legionnaire. Taking a closer look at this particular Heretic Trooper I'm showing off today, this one has a cape, which is very cool, very stylish. I'm really happy with how the paint scheme worked out on that. In his left hand, he has what looks like an MP40 or equivalent submachine gun. And then he has a mace, which I have bloodied the heck out of. On his belt there, you can see he has a little canister of what looks like maybe a canteen or some sort of explosive, some little bags along the side, and then obviously, it's kind of hard to see, but the little shriveled fetus that he has. Don't worry about it. Overall, I think Trench Crusade just rocks in the model department. Even something simple as like a basic little infantry guy for Heretic Legions is super, super flashy and cool. He has so many different variations you can give him, and I just like the little guy. I like his little gas mask. So I'm going to give the Heretic Troopers an 8 out of 10, and I'm also, just to brag a little bit, really happy with how his paint scheme ended up. Today's model showcase is a Necron Scarab Swarm. As the name implies, the Scarab Swarm is, well, the swarm unit of the Necrons. The main purpose of the Scarab Swarm is to either go claim units on the edges of the field, or to run into the middle of combat and just tie up an enemy unit. The Scarab Swarms first had a model back in 1998, though it's unclear if they had any rules. Then in 2002, they got a new model release on an actual base that was included in the Necron Warriors box. Then in 2013, they got another new model that was specifically on Forge World. And then in 2020, they got this updated model that is still included in Necron Warriors boxes. Scarab Swarms are one of the few units in the game that have never had their own box. You have to buy Necron Warriors to get more of them. Or, more accurately, you're saddled with a lot of them as you're just buying Necron Warriors to fill up your force. In the lore, Scarab Swarms serve as little fixer bots, but are sometimes thrown into combat to muddy up enemy forces or just take gunfire or what have you. Taking a closer look at the model itself, I really like how it's very hard to tell where they sort of start taking off of the ground. You can see it's actually this little rock back here, but I've also hidden it well with all the little grass patches I've added. They've all got these little orbs at their middle, which sort of suggest there's some sort of power source. And I just really like how they all connect and seem to be just sort of climbing on each other. It's very cool. And that's pretty much it. I really like the Scarab Swarms. I think they're cute. I think they're fun. But I think their model is just sort of, it's neat. So I'm going to give them a 6 out of 10. They're solid. They're fine. And I already feel like I screwed up my ranking metrics, but whatever. Today's model showcases the Knight Castellan. First released in 2018, the Knight Castellan is one of 2 Dominus pattern knights. The Knight Castellan serves as the weapons platform for the Imperial Knights. Now, that might not sound like much, because, every knight is a weapons platform. But, the Knight Castellan does it different. To illustrate, let's just go over all of the guns he has. They have the massive Plasma Decimator, the Volcano Lance, which is just a massive FU to any monsters or vehicles that dare to exist. 2 sets of twin Meltaguns, 2 sets of twin Siegebreaker cannons, and 2 Shieldbreaker missiles. That is a lot of firepower. If you're playing Knights, this is the one you bring to put down in your back line and eradicate anything that is stupid enough to walk into its sightline. Taking a closer look at the model itself, I have decided to go for a House Raven paint scheme for this particular knight. I paint all of my knights differently as I'm sort of going for a Freeblade style, but this one I decided to just go with the House Raven design. Speaking of that, I really like this weird, triangle hut design that are on the House Raven transfers. I don't really know what it's supposed to represent or signify, but I think it's neat. Like all of the other knights, this guy has a lot of these Mechanicus designs just sort of strewn about the model, just to remind you who's really dealing the death around here in the universe. Despite how massive this model is, there's really not much more to say about it, other than just, run. So I'm going to give the Knight Castellan a 9 out of 10. I like all of the knights. They're one of my favorite aesthetics, and this is my favorite of the bunch. Solid stuff. No, really, you should run them. Today's model showcase is a Zangor Enlightened. The Zangor Enlightened released in 2017, originally for Age of Sigmar for the Tzeentch faction. Then, later that year, the Zangors and the Zangor Enlightened got ported over to 8th edition Warhammer 40k to be part of the Thousand Sons faction. The Zangor Enlightened are a great fast attack choice for the Thousand Sons, an army that has been historically very slow moving. And in Age of Sigmar, where they are now part of the Disciples of Tzeentch faction, they serve much the same purpose. For 40k, when you're building your Zangor Enlightened, you can choose to either give them the bows or their polearm weapons. I personally recommend giving them the bows, as they seem to be better suited for just flying around the board, claiming unclaimed objectives, and trying to snipe out characters that are on their own, or smaller units of infantry. In Age of Sigmar, the choice of weapon for the Zangor Enlightened actually changes them into different units. The polearm variant being the Zangor Enlightened, and the bow variant being the Zangor Skyfires. Now let's take a closer look at the model itself. I mean, just a gorgeous model. I gotta give myself some credit for this paint scheme. I feel like I did a pretty good job. But also just the posing of the model, the weird sort of warp storm that's holding the disc up, the disc itself, which is nasty and I love it. And even the details on the bow are beautiful. Just all around, gorgeous model. I also just have to note, I have a soft spot for Beastmen. I just like the aesthetic. Can't really tell you why, because I don't know why. I just think they're really cool. I mean, look at the horns. Look at the cool ram horns, dude. I mean, what else is there to say? If you play Age of Sigmar and you play Disciples of Tzeentch, you definitely need some of these. If you play 40k and you play Thousand Suns, I'd say get at least one box of them. They do serve their purpose, and at the very least, I mean, they're just such a fun painting project that I think all Thousand Suns players should give them a shot. All that being said, I'm going to give the Zangor Enlightened a 10 out of 10. That's right, my first 10 out of 10 model. And can you blame me? Come on, guys. Get yourself a copy of this unit. Today's model showcase is the Captain in Gravis Armor. The Captain in Gravis Armor first appeared in 2017 in the Dark Imperium box set. Then in 2021, the Gravis Captain got not one, but two updated models. The first one was a new variant that gave the Captain in Gravis Armor access to a master-crafted heavy bolt rifle. The second one was just an update to this model with the sword and the Boltstorm Gauntlet. Like all other captains, the Gravis Captain decreases the cost of stratagems for the unit he's leading. However, the Gravis Captain has a much more limited pool of units that he can be attached to, having only 3 options: Aggressor Squads, Eradicator Squads, and Heavy Intercessor Squads. So, if you happen to have a more Gravis-centered army, then Captain in Gravis Armor is a great choice for you. Let's take a closer look at the model itself, but before we do that, I want to point out that the first ever model I painted was a Captain in Gravis Armor. It was not this guy, it was this guy. Yes, this is the first ever model I painted back when I was 15. And oh boy, I have certainly gotten a lot better, but yeah, you can clearly see I did not know how to thin my paints or to wash my brushes, or, you know, the idea of colors clashing or being good next to each other. You got to start somewhere, right? This newer one I've painted, which I still think was like 5 years ago, is definitely a lot better. I played around with the sword in unique ways that I think was cool. I just had a general better idea of color and not just throwing reds and whites places just because why not. And I just had a clearer idea of my paint scheme for my force at the time. Though, if I were to get a third Captain in Gravis Armor, I'll show that off because I feel like I've improved way more even since this model. Anyways, taking a closer look at the actual model, he's got this relic blade, which used to be called a mastercrafted power sword, which again, I'm happy with how that paint scheme ended up. He's got Aquillas all over his armor. This very cool cape that seems to be tamped down by his backpack. We're not going to ask how he gets that on. A sort of belt-fed ammunition system to the Boltstorm Gauntlet. He's got a purity seal on the left hip, as we know and love. And then it's kind of hard to see, but hanging from his junk, he's just got bones. What he do with the bones? And while we're at it, purity seal, purity seal. And of course, topping it off, the iron halo, just to make it even easier to see that this is a captain from far off. And that wraps it up. 7 out of 10 for this model. Today's model showcase is a Helldrake. Helldrake, released in 2012, is the aircraft unit for the Chaos Space Marines. They could have been boring and just, you know, ported over a Stormhawk with some extra spikes or something. But no, they decided to release a frickin' dragon. Unfortunately, in 10th edition, the Helldrake sees a lot less play than he used to, just because flyers aren't very good right now. But you will still catch me using a Helldrake just because it's so cool. When you're building your Helldrake, you can choose to either give it a Bale Flamer or a Hades autocannon. And I'ma be real, if you don't choose the option that gives your Robo-Drake the ability to literally breathe fire, I don't care if it's better, something is wrong with you. Taking a closer look at the model itself, I mean, where do I even start? I'm at a loss for words, honestly. Just like the Stormhawk and other flyers, it has this 4-pronged clear stand. Once again, please paint your Helldrake before you attach it to the stand. You'll thank me. It has this like 4-tiered dagger wing design with teeth on it, which is just so visually appealing and striking from a distance. You can see there are parts along like the neck and sort of the back here where flesh meets metal, which is pretty typical for demon engines. You can also see one of my talons broke off. That's actually pretty sad. Like I said earlier, the gun that you give it is embedded into its mouth with this weird sort of goo modeled in there that's probably not fun if it's flying over you and it spills some onto you. You can see more fleshy details on the back here where the metal and spine sort of connect, and you can actually see the spine poking out of the back. Freaking awesome! And as a side note, I remember this being the first ever model that I painted that I was really happy with when it was done. There are still some things that I might go back and touch up on, like the base isn't really done yet. And there are some, like, on the wings, some of the shading doesn't really look super clean, but maybe that's a good thing. But all around, I love what I did with this model. It's kind of hard to make this model look bad, so overall, I mean, goodness, I love this design so much. I love how angular it is. I love everything about it. It's probably my favorite model in 40K, with maybe some contenders that we'll see later. So, unsurprisingly, I have to give the Helldrake a 10 out of 10. I mean, can you blame me? Pick one of these up if you're playing CSM. I don't care if they're bad right now. Today's model showcase is a Rubric Marine. First released in 2016 at the tail end of 7th edition, the Rubric Marine is the basic infantry for the Thousand Sons. The Rubric Marine is a perfect choice for any Thousand Sons list, unless you're specifically running like all Zangors or something. Like much of the rest of the Thousand Sons force, their weapons have high armor penetration and they are all around just very durable. When making a unit of Rubric Marines, you can choose to either give them Inferno bolt guns, like this guy here, or you can give them Warp Flamers, like this guy here. As is probably obvious, you want to choose Warp Flamers if you want a unit to just push up the board and take objectives, but you want to choose Inferno bolt guns if you want to hold points in your backline or just form a gun line. As some of you may have been able to notice, the blue on this Rubric Marine is slightly different from the blue on this one. That's because I painted this one wrong. Taking a closer look at the model itself, I love the over-the-top Egyptian theming for the Thousand Sons. Are the headdresses silly and impractical? Yes. Do I love them? Yes. I think these are probably some of the best infantry in the game, at least Space Marine themed infantry. The headdresses are really cool, like I said earlier. Their Inferno bolt guns have these cool sort of like runes etched into them that are glowing. He has this cool little tabard hanging from his junk, and he has like gems sort of just scattered throughout his armor. One little issue I have with Rubric Marines is, although I like how over the top it is, a lot of this trim that you see is really annoying to paint. If you thought normal Chaos trim was bad, you have not painted Thousand Sons before. So if you're going to get into Thousand Sons, just be aware you're going to be spending an hour, maybe more, just painting the trims on these bad boys. But that aside, I love the Rubric Marine and its variations. I think it's super, super cool, and so I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10. Today's model showcase is an Assault Intercessor. First released in 2020 in the Indomitus box set, the Assault Intercessor is the melee counterpart to the Intercessor and the Heavy Intercessor. Their high volume of melee attacks and their just general durability, as seeing as they are Space Marines, means that they are a great candidate for pushing into no man's land objectives or even the enemy deployment zone. All Assault Intercessors are equipped with a Astartes chain sword, which is just a slightly better chain sword, and a heavy bolt pistol, which is a higher armor penetration bolt pistol. Taking a closer look at the details of this model, I really like the pose on this guy, as instead of a slow methodical march like with normal intercessors, he is in a full dead sprint. All of the Assault Intercessors have this little Imperium design on their vambraces, just seemingly another little detail to differentiate them from normal intercessors. Now would be a good time as any to talk about the sort of winged skull design on the chest pieces of all Space Marines. I sort of interpret it as a sign or perhaps warning to the friends and foes of the Imperium that the Emperor's angels have arrived, and this is one of the first things you see to reinforce that idea. Going over some other small details, we have a purity seal on this Marine's right leg. You can see his holster for the heavy bolt pistol, which is empty, as it should be. It would be very weird if it wasn't. And we see a smattering of little snack pouches along his belt. I have a little piece of advice for any painters out there. You'll see that I have some blood for the blood god along the chainsword, which just makes it look a little cooler. But I also have might be kind of hard to see, a little splotch on the shoulder pad there. That is where I made a little painting mistake. I think I was painting the eyes of the Marine and just accidentally flicked some yellow onto the shoulder pad. And instead of painting back over it with black, I decided to put some blood for the blood god over it. And you can see maybe that the lighter color underneath the blood for the blood god actually makes it pop a little bit more. So you can actually just see, oh, there's a little splotch of blood on that Marine's shoulder pad. So that's just a little tip. You could paint over mistakes like that with just the correct color if you want to, or you can turn it into something fun, which I always recommend over anything else. So that's the Assault Intercessor. Definitely a marked improvement over the normal Intercessors, as these guys just have much more dynamic poses, and I feel like they just had a better idea of how to make these guys interesting. So I'm going to give the Assault Intercessor a 7 out of 10. Today's model showcase is a Harlequin troop. The Harlequin troop player is, well, the basic troop of the Harlequins, which are definitely still their own faction, and definitely weren't just roped into Eldar. Jokes aside, the Harlequin troop is actually an elite shock troop for the Eldar. The Harlequin troop first released all the way back in 1988. For context, my dad would have been 10 years old when these released. Then in 2015, they got these new plastic miniatures that have much more dynamic designs and interchangeable parts. The Harlequin troop is a great choice for having a fast, hard-hitting infantry squad. They may not look like much, as they're simply a unit of 5 pretty small miniatures, but don't be fooled. Charge a unit of Harlequin troop into any infantry unit, and they will tear them to shreds. However, if they're not able to close out the job in one attack phase, then they will probably die on the backswing, as they, like all other Eldar, are very squishy. But their chances of just wiping out a unit that they charge is actually pretty high. I had a game recently where I was playing against Black Templars, and one unit of Harlequin troop with a troop master in it charged a unit of Sword Brethren with Helbrecht in it, and the Harlequins tore them apart. Taking a closer look at the model itself, this guy is equipped with a fusion pistol, which is essentially a handheld melt-a-gun. He's also supposed to be equipped with a Harlequin's Kiss, which was a unique weapon option they had available before they just sort of merged all of them into one weapon. However, as you can clearly see, this one is broken. Here's what the Harlequin's Kiss is supposed to look like, and this model in general I think is also just well painted than that other one, but so word of advice for anybody getting Harlequins, either glue your models further to the edge of the base for the center of gravity, or cheat with money. Other details of this model, I really like their kind of silly rainbow mohawks. They just look really cool and give them a very unique aesthetic. This guy also has a super sweet coat with a really cool cape that I wish I could put on all of the Harlequins, but eh. And his mask has a sort of gold and silver half and half design that I had a lot of fun painting at the time. Speaking of painting, you might notice that I have no checkerboard patterns on either of those Harlequins I showed. That's because painting those is really hard. And that about wraps it up. I'm going to give the Harlequin troop a 9 out of 10, as I just think they're so over the top, and I love that. Today's model showcase is a Primaris Chaplain. This model should be very familiar to anybody who's played the game Space Marine 2, as a chaplain plays a major part in that game's story. There were chaplain models released all the way back in the early 90s. However, the Primaris variant of the model didn't release until 2017. Obviously, as that was the same year that all of the Primaris line came out. In 8th edition, and I believe also 9th edition, the Primaris Chaplain and the normal Old Marine Chaplain were 2 separate units. However, nowadays, the old Chaplain and the new Primaris Chaplains are considered to be the same model. In 2020, the Primaris Chaplain got a new release with the Indomitus box, which is this miniature here, which you can see is unpainted, and I'll probably have a separate short going into this guy once I have painted him. But what I will say is I feel like that new design lacks a lot of the things that makes this chaplain very cool, like the skull mask, the hood, and just how over the top it is. I mean, come on. Chaplain is a great choice to put as a leader of any unit you plan on charging into melee, as he gives +1 to all of your wound rolls for that unit. He also has a secondary ability where he can make any of your battle-shocked units become unbattle-shocked, which is pretty nice. Taking a closer look at the model itself, you can see he is raising high the Crozius Arcanum, which has been bloodied a little bit. He has an Absolver bolt pistol in his other hand. You can see he's got a holster for his pistol on his hip with a little purity seal on it. I swear there will be one day where GW will accidentally model a gun in there, even though he already has it out. I will catch you lacking, GW. He's got all sorts of tchotchkes just sort of strewn all about, which you can see I didn't paint super well, but it is what it is. He's got these really big, fancy purity seals coming down from his chest. He's got ribs modeled onto his chest plate for some reason. Don't know why, but it's cool as hell. And next to these little bags filled with trail mix, he has a book, which is probably some sort of prayer book that he consults, though he most likely has the entire thing memorized. And honestly, not much more to say other than I really like how the iron halo is sort of angled down over his head. But this model in general is just dripping with aura. Just the way his cape flows out around him. Super, super cool stuff. And that about wraps it up. I'm going to give the 2017 rendition of the Primaris Chaplain a 10 out of 10. I just think this model is super swag, and honestly, I want to get another one of him so I can paint him a little bit better, but I'm still happy with how this one turned out. Today's model showcase is a Legionnaire. From 1988 to the 1990s to 2007, the Chaos Space Marine or Legionnaire has had a lot of renditions. However, this updated Legionnaire or CSM model released back in 2019 in the Shadow Spear box set. Since then, they've largely kept this exact same design. However, there are some new minis releasing as part of the Red Corsairs that I want very badly. The Legionnaires are the basic infantry of the Chaos Space Marines. They are wildly versatile, from their weapon choices to just the overall utility on the battlefield, but they are most often used as point holders. The Legionnaires have a vast range of weapons that you can give them, from special weapons to heavy weapons. However, most commonly you will either give your unit bolt guns or chainswords and bolt pistols. As is probably obvious, one is gunline, one is melee. Taking a closer look at the model itself, you can see his bolt gun is very reminiscent to Imperial bolt guns, but has a little more chaosy flair to it with that little gem in the middle. You can see he has a bolt pistol strapped to his thigh. While we're on that, holster check on this guy. Oh, he just doesn't have a holster. Well, all right then. While we're looking at this particular model, you can see that they've obviously replaced the Imperial Aquila on their chest with a more chaosy, sort of six-pointed star design. Most Legionnaires have either horns or tusks growing out of their helmets, whether these are just sort of aesthetic designs or actual mutations, I guess sort of depends on the Legion you're playing. I made warning to this when I was covering the Rubric Marine, but most Chaos models, unfortunately, have a lot of weird trim on their armor. That is a pain in the butt to paint, so keep that in mind. You can see I've painted my Legionnaires in an Iron Warriors paint scheme. I really like the silver and bronze. I think they look very cool, and it's also just very easy to do. Paint all your colors, coat it in Agrax Earthshade, and you're basically done. And that about covers it. It's another basic Space Marine infantry unit, but a little more interesting, a little more spice. So I'm going to give the Legionnaires a 7 out of 10. That seems solid to me. Today's model showcase is an Exalted Sorcerer. First released at the tail end of 2016, the Exalted Sorcerer is a generic leader for the Thousand Sons. There are actually two variations of Exalted Sorcerer, the normal Exalted Sorcerer on foot, and an Exalted Sorcerer on Disc of Tzeentch. However, for now we're just talking about the on-foot Exalted Sorcerer, as they're actually two very different units. The normal Exalted Sorcerer can only lead Rubric Marines, but as his abilities are primarily defensive, it doesn't really matter what loadout you give the Rubric Marines, as this Exalted Sorcerer will give them value no matter what. An interesting note about Exalted Sorcerers is that they come in boxes of 3 for some reason, despite being a singular character model. So you will never see a Thousand Suns collection where they have only one Exalted Sorcerer, unless they bought that sorcerer through third-party means like eBay or what have you. When you assemble your box of Exalted Sorcerers, you will get one that looks like this, that's sort of hovering in the air, one on a disc of Zinj, and one that's just strictly on foot. This one has a staff broken. Each one is unique enough where I think I'm going to give them all their own individual model showcases. So let's jump into talking about this guy. Taking a closer look at the model itself, there are actually a lot of different variations on headdresses, staves, what have you, weapons that can drastically change how each Exalted Sorcerer looks. You can see this guy has, and let's count them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arms. That's pretty wacky and gives him a very distinct look. And just super dynamic. He can hold the staff with 2 hands, but also be reaching out with a clawed hand, but also be shooting a gun, but also be doing whatever this is. This guy has an Inferno bolt pistol, which you can see has a sort of bird skull design attached above the muzzle, which is pretty neat. A lot of bolt weapons from the Thousand Suns will have designs like this. He's got all manner of scrolls just sort of hanging from him, this little book stashed underneath his cloak there. Braziers here that look very, very cool. This guy's staff has sort of a wooden design to it, and you can see the head of it is almost like a planetarium design. Kind of hard to see because my phone doesn't want to focus. His cape and cloak is very flashy and like billowing outwards as power is radiating from him. And of course, the elephant in the room, he has taken a page out of Wario's book and is propelling himself with flatulence. And on that note, that about wraps it up. The Exalted Sorcerers can be about as cool as you want them to be, with just so many variations and looks and designs. So I'm going to give this Exalted Sorcerer in particular a 9 out of 10. Today's model showcase is an Aggressor. First released in 2017, the Aggressors are the heavy infantry for the Space Marines. A squad of Aggressors can be outfitted with either Flamestorm gauntlets, like you see here, or Auto Boltstorm gauntlets and Fragstorm grenade launchers. I only have the Flamestorm gauntlet variant to show off here, because I'm playing Salamanders. Why would I build anything but Flamers? The Aggressors are a great choice for either pushing slowly forward through the center of the board, or standing on a point and never moving. When the Aggressor Squad first released, they actually weren't a typical plastic kit. They were actually a little push-fit kit. The intention of the push-fit kits was to basically eliminate the need for glue. You could just snap their little pegs in and then they would stay together. Or at least that was the intention. As you can maybe see, this guy is pretty wobbly, as he has nothing holding him down to the ground there. And there are some other little details that are missing from this model in general. They were more meant to be sort of a test run for the Aggressors. But now we have these new updated Aggressors. I'm not exactly sure when these came out, but it wasn't too soon after the push-fit original models. Taking a closer look at the model itself, you can see he has the aforementioned Flamestorm gauntlets bolted onto his hands. I'm not sure exactly how he fires them. Maybe it's just a trigger within his grip or something. You can see he has a skull on this hand, because 40k. He has another skull down there, a bunch of skulls hanging from his junk, and then this skull design on his shoulder. I think this one in particular is supposed to signify that he is the sergeant of this squad. Him being a sergeant is also signified by him not wearing a helmet, because real ones don't need head protection, I guess. I really like these ropes that are holding his various tchotchkes together to his chest and groin. I don't know. It's something different to contrast the just greens and golds of all the other Marines. You can see there are just all sorts of tubes and wires running from the backpack to the weapons, probably just fueling them with promethium. In fact, his backpack is expanded with these little, what looks like tanks that are probably filled with promethium. And of course, the elephant in the room, he is a Gravis Marine, so he's a little bit slower, but a little bit more durable. And also just, well, obviously bulkier and has the sort of hood coming up over his head. And that about wraps it up. The aggressors are one of my favorite units, if not my favorite unit in Space Marines, just because, again, I play salamanders. I like flamers. But visually, it's a cool model, don't get me wrong. But Gravis never really stood out to me. I think it's solid, but nothing more. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Today's model showcase is a Master of Possessions. One moment. Green. First released in 2019 as part of the Shadow Spear box set, the Master of Possessions is a basic character unit for the Chaos Space Marines. The Master of Possessions, or MOP, has the ability to lead Legionnaires, Chosen, and Possessed. Interestingly, all of his weapons have anti-psyker and precision, meaning that he is specifically designed to wipe out psyker characters from units. He can even inflict damage on his own squad to increase the potency of those anti-psyker attacks. But that's not all he does, as he also gives the unit he's leading +1 to advance and charge rolls. He even has a base move of 8 inches, meaning that he is best used in a squad of Possessed. Taking a closer look at the model itself, what a cool design all around. This model just exemplifies everything middle-aged mothers were concerned about back in the 80s. He's got this really cool staff that goes from wooden to goat head, devil iconography, good stuff. He's got this goat ram head skull helmet. And of course, he's covered head to toe in all sorts of chaos iconography. He also has a little bolt pistol. Not that it serves him a whole lot of purpose, as all of his guns are pistol, but it's 1 extra shot, a strength 4. It's fine, I guess. And of course, the cherry on top, the burning skulls on his backpack, and the little burning skull that he's holding. I kind of forgot that this was a skull and not just a fireball that he's about to throw. But no, it's a full skull. When I first painted this model, I was worried that the Iron Warriors aesthetic wouldn't mix well with this very overt, demonic hell aesthetic. But I'm happy to say I think it all meshes very well. The silver and bronze, the reds, the fire, it all seems to mix really well in my opinion. I noticed a few other details, so let's go over those. He has this little bone dagger on his right hip. I believe this is supposed to be the sacrificial dagger that he uses in his rules, the one that allows him to damage his own unit to buff his own spells. You can see he has some skulls hanging down from his cape, because he didn't have enough skulls already. And to top that off, he has some bones hanging from the back of his cloak. That there looks like a bone, but it's actually some sort of scroll. And then his backpack has 2 big skulls tied to the ends of it. So quick skull count, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think that's it. This is the type of over-the-top I love to see from 40K. And this is probably one of my favorite CSM models. Do I feel like giving it the 10 out of 10? Oh, it's real close, but I think I will. 10 out of 10. Today's model showcase is a Plasmancer. First released in 2020 in the Indomitus box set, the Plasmancer is a Cryptek character for the Necrons. There used to be a time where there was only a single Cryptek model that could branch out into different specialities. But now we have a wide variety of Crypteks, from Plasmancers to Chronomancers to Geomancers and what have you. The uniting factor of all Crypteks is that they can be added to units even if there is already a noble leading that unit. The speciality of the Plasmancer is dishing out mortal wounds to nearby enemies, and increasing the likelihood of scoring critical hits for his unit. Which means that the Plasmancer is a great choice for leading any unit that really likes sustained hits or lethal hits. Though, like many Necron characters, he can only lead Immortals and Necron Warriors, so keep that in mind. Taking a closer look at the model itself, he has his Plasmic Lance, which is both a ranged attack and a melee attack. It has pretty high strength and damage, and looks pretty cool. Like all Necron melee weapons, they're sort of intended to have this green sort of energy blade design that is kind of hard to make look right, but when it does look right, it looks pretty cool. Bro really be out here looking like the Crimson Chin. I'm a big fan of that. And he's got these weird, like, tubes that are pumping something into him. They're probably some sort of plasma that he either discharges or I don't really know. I think it looks cool though. And on top of that, Bro doesn't have legs. He is just sort of floating there. Obviously, it's not hard to tell where he connects with the base, so I don't think the illusion is fully there, but it does look pretty cool. I like how they managed to give him a sort of hunched crone look. It really adds to the, like, I'm gonna curse you vibes. And there's not much more to say. Very simple, yet very stylish character. It's a small little guy, so they didn't really need to give him too much, but they gave him just enough to make him unique and interesting. So I'll give the Plasmancer, we'll go an 8 out of 10. I think in general Necrons are very cool, especially modern Necron designs. Today's model showcases an Armiger Helverin. The Armiger Pattern of Night was first released in 2018 within the Forgebane box set. However, you could only build Armiger Warglaves out of that box. The Armiger Helverin was introduced later that same year. The Armiger Helverin is the closest thing you'll get to a basic foot soldier for the Imperial Knights. The Armiger autocannons they wield are great at dealing with heavy infantry or even small vehicles. Side note, I find it kind of funny that they're referred to as small knights, because yes, in comparison to the normal knights, they're pretty small, but I mean, look how this thing fits in my hand. It's huge. That all aside, the Armiger Helverin is a great choice for any knight list. You'll probably want a good smattering of Armigers to help sort of just fill out your force. Taking a closer look at the model itself, I really, really like the Armiger autocannons. The way you build them, you can sort of let them swivel, which I like when models do that. They have a bit of posability on the spot. When building your Armiger, you can choose to give it either a melt-a-gun or a heavy stubber on top. I have built this one to have a melt-a-gun. Though in all honesty, I would recommend doing a heavy stubber for the Helverins and doing the melt-a-guns for the Warglaves. You can see I have painted this knight in a House Terran paint style. Don't know why, that's just what I felt like when I painted this guy. That's sort of the goal with my knights, give them all a different color and sort of just test out different paint schemes to see if I like them. And this is a paint scheme I'm happy with. There are some things that I've definitely improved on, but I really like the blue and red. I think they contrast really well. You can see, like all other knights, this one has a Mechanicus symbol on the back, and all sorts of machinery I don't fully understand, but I think looks very cool. Jumping back to the House Terran point, you can see their symbols are this, like, horse head for some reason, and then half of an Aquila. And I guess those are neat. I don't know. I don't have super strong feelings on those. They're just sort of there. And that's kind of all there is to say about the Armigers. They're basic, but because they need to be. You will probably have quite a few of them in your army. Well, quite a few as in, like, 5, but hey, that's still a lot for knights. So I'm going to give the Armiger Helverin, let's say, a 7 out of 10. I think I like their general shape and silhouette, but other than that, pretty basic, but I think they're cool. Today's model showcase is a Zangor. First released in 2017, initially for Age of Sigmar, and then eventually that same year ported to 40k, the Zangor is a close quarters infantry unit. In 40k, the Zangors serve the purpose of being cheap, kinda squishy scout infantry, serving the purpose of putting early pressure on objectives and then dying. So yeah, not super great, but they're only 7 points a model, so I mean, not a big deal, I guess. But in Age of Sigmar, Zangors get a massive glow up. They are melee combat beasts in Age of Sigmar, able to lay down a lot of damage and take a surprising amount of it as well. So if you're playing 40k and you're playing Thousand Suns, yeah, maybe 1 box of Zangors, you really don't need that many. But in Age of Sigmar, if you're playing Disciples of Tzeentch, yeah, you're probably going to want a lot of these, but it sort of depends on your own personal playstyle. Taking a closer look at the model itself, you can see that this guy is equipped with a chainsword and an auto pistol. These do not come with the Zangor box. Instead, they are a $15 upgrade box that gives you 5 of each. That is not worth it. For one, you would only be able to switch out 5 of your 10 Zangors with these weapons. 2, if you just use the weapons that are in their box, they are compatible with both games, but giving them the chainsword and auto pistol makes them no longer compatible with Age of Sigmar. And 3, these weapons are just worse than their normal Zangor blades. You get more attacks, and you get a really bad ranged option, but you're losing out on the higher strength of the Zangor blades. So yeah, this isn't worth it at all. Yet, here we are. I have to live with the consequences of my actions. That all being said, I do really like the design of the Zangor chainsword and the auto pistol. They're very over the top, but they really fit in with the rest of the Thousand Suns aesthetic, whereas the Zangors in general don't fully fit with that aesthetic, but this brings them more in line with the rest of the army. As I made mention in previous shorts, I just really like the Birdmen. There's something weirdly fun about them, and I think their horns are super cool, especially when you dry brush paint them. In fact, this entire model takes really well to dry brushing. The horns, the feathers on the back of the neck that I've sort of gradually built up to a purple, the kilt, the skin itself. I just have a lot of praise for the Zangor. I just think they're silly little guys, and I like running them, even if they're bad in 40k. Pointing out some of the little details, you can see he's got like a little eye on his belt, which I actually want to go pick out and paint now. He's got what looks like, it's kind of hard to see, but a tiny little bird skull that I've painted in gold. And then a little, what looks like ritual dagger on his hip that he kind of has no point in having. And that about wraps it up. I like the Zangor probably a bit more than I should, so I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10, just because I think he's a silly little guy. Today's model showcases the Indomitus Captain. The Indomitus Captain is the nickname given to this Primaris Captain model that released in the Indomitus box set. Released in 2020, the Indomitus box was the starter box for Warhammer 9th edition, and with it came a brand new line of Primaris Space Marines, often referred to as the Blade Guard aesthetic. And oh boy, what a first impression. I mean, look at this guy. We'll get more into the details of the model itself, but it is just gorgeous on the offset. In-game, the Captain unit has a wide variety of units it can lead, from Assault Intercessors to Hellblasters to Blade Guard, what have you. And since the main ability of the Captain is to reduce the cost of your stratagems, he really fits into whatever unit you give him. It just sort of depends on the playstyle you're going for. And so since I like Salamanders, I usually put a Captain in my Infernus squad, because that makes my cool turn Flamers into Devastating Wounds ability much cheaper. In addition, he has a once per game buff to give his sword +3 attacks and devastating wounds. Pretty nasty stuff. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's take a closer look at the model itself. Let's start with the coolest shield I've ever seen in my entire life. First off, this thing is massive. Just look at it compared to the Captain. Also, it fits an entire skeleton onto it. Why is there an entire skeleton holding like an hourglass strapped to his shield? Shut up, it's cool, that's why. I don't have a whole lot of time to linger on any one detail, which is sad because I really want to. But he has 3 purity seals on the same shield and like a halo emanating out from the skeleton. It's just so freaking cool. In his other hand, he's wielding a mastercrafted power sword, which you can see I have painted to subtly radiate like a blue sort of energy crackling across it. On his right shoulder pad, he has this like sunburst with a very detailed Aquila on it. In fact, he also has those sunburst designs on his knee pads. Kinda cool. Like a lot of other Space Marine characters, he's got a lot of tchotchkes hanging from his junk. He's got more purity seals hanging from the, like, breast shield? I don't remember what that's called, but it's cool. I really like the design of this iron halo. You can see it's kind of broken, unfortunately, which is making me sad. He's got another little purity seal hanging beneath that armor piece. He's got more under that one. And you can see his heavy bolt pistol strapped to his back, which just by looking at it, you can tell it's a little bit bigger than other bolt pistols. And of course you can see like these robes hanging out from under his armor that evoke a very Dark Angel style that I think is really cool. And to top it all off, there is a Necron on his base that has seemingly been cut in half. I wonder how that happened. I know I talked very fast and there was a lot going on in this, but that's just because I wanted to show off all of these amazing details from this model, but unfortunately I'm out of time. 10 out of 10. Today's model showcase is a Screamer of Tzeentch. The Screamers had metal models all the way back in 2002, with these new plastic kits releasing in 2012. The Screamers are a fast attack hit and run unit for the Disciples of Tzeentch in Age of Sigmar and the Demons of Tzeentch in Warhammer 40,000. They both serve essentially the same purpose in both games, being extremely agile yet relatively squishy demon units that, when they fly over enemy units, inflict a little bit of damage. So I would say they're mostly designed to soften up foes around the table before hitting them with bigger targets. Taking a closer look at the model itself, there's actually not a whole lot to talk about, so this is probably going to be a shorter one of my model reviews, but there are some details I should cover. First off, like most of the Tzeentch Demon range, I like how there's a lot of variation just in one unit. For example, the general shape and designs of one Screamer will be relatively different on a different Screamer. You know, that's the problem with doing unscripted videos like this, is I use different back to back in the same sentence. It sounds very good. That aside, I really like the asymmetrical design of this one's tusks. There's really no reason for that to exist the way it does, but that's probably exactly why Tzeentch decided to design this specific guy like this. There's also a lot of asymmetry in the eye placements, with having 4 eyes on the right side and 2 eyes on the left side. So all around, this guy just is very right heavy with his facial designs. Don't know why, and I don't think Tzeentch knows why either. I like the spines and spikes that are coming out of the front of this thing, just to reinforce you really don't want this thing flying towards you. He's also got a shark fin for some reason. And I really like the twisted flax, sort of almost DNA sort of shape to this Screamer's tails. On a similar vein I was talking to earlier, I like how this particular Screamer almost seems as if it has like scales growing out of it, whereas that other one I showed you is a lot more just sort of leathery. It's kind of cool. One quick side note, really quick, that I just sort of thought about. When you paint Screamers, like you would paint any of the flyers, glue your Screamers to the base after you're done painting them so you don't end up with this like spray painted mess that I have. And that about wraps it up. I'm sort of not entirely impressed with the Screamers. I think they're cool, but I don't know. Nothing about them really speaks to me a whole lot. So I'm going to give this guy like a 5 out of 10. Not bad, but not great either. Today's model showcase is a Crypto Thrall. First released in 2020 in the Indomitus box set, the Crypto Thrall is a bodyguard unit for the Necrons. Their entire purpose is bodyguarding Cryptek models. Essentially, at the start of a game, you choose a unit that has a Cryptek in it, and you attach the Crypto Thralls to that same unit. And while they're in that unit, they give the Cryptek a 4-up Feel No Pain, and they base have a when they die, they get to fight ability. And they're like, okay. They fight decently well, they get a good amount of attacks, but they're mostly just there to add a little bit more padding for your important Crypteks. Taking a closer look at the model itself, it's a very sort of weirdly hunched and like bulky design. Broby looking like a cylinder. But I would definitely say it's a unique look for Necrons. You don't usually see something like this outside of like flayed ones, but they're still very different to this. Like their little scythed limbs. Had to put some extra pronunciation into that, I guess. And it's kind of hard to see on initial viewing, but there is a little like energy core sphere built into them that's sort of reminiscent of scarab swarms. They also got this one eye, which is sort of a common design trait you'll see among Crypteks, if my knowledge serves me correctly. The eye also serves as their ranged weapon, which is pretty freaking sick, actually. Another thing I noticed that might not actually be the case at all is these 2 little prongs that come out off the back are sort of reminiscent of the 2 extra boys who are on the Silent King model. So I wonder if these are sort of supposed to represent a like honor guard style unit. Or maybe I'm just heavily overthinking that. And that about wraps it up. Short one this time for a very simple model that serves a very simple purpose that, you know, if you have 60 free points, throw one of these guys in a Cryptek unit. So I'm going to give them like a 5 out of 10. They're like fine.